For hundreds of years, mankind has been searching for the secret of perfect stringer control. Today, you can join Corina Jones as she is about to take you towards revelation.
Right bean here, follow me. Step carefully, these are treacherous forests. Oh my God! I found it! After years and years of searching. Well, I promised a friend that this time there wouldn't be any dogs in the shots, but I had to show Bonzo and Minnie. Bonzo, say hi. Not to me. So this is Bonzo. This is the famous Bonzo Break Chihuahua, and this is his daughter Minnie. She's kind of actually an ugly little nut, but these dogs will not appear in the video, and we have to introduce Scooter. Scooter, come here. Come here. Say hi. Come here. Scooter has to come. Okay, come on. There. There she is. Dr. Scooter. Say hi. Look that way. Scooter, look that way. So we promise that no dogs have been harmed in the making of this video, right? Okay, so now I can go. Thank you. Say goodbye. This is all the goofy dog business you're gonna get in this DVD. Okay, go outside, Scooter. No? She wants to stay somewhere. So this time, where did the script go, Dawn? We have to show that we actually had a script that let you know. Well, we have it somewhere here. It's about this thick a stash of paper. But anyway, the DVD is filmed, and what you're about to see I hope will be useful for you. One thing I have to warn you about is that, oh yeah, here. This is the script. So, and you're only gonna watch this once, so don't complain and just sit back and relax, because you will never ever have to watch this introduction again. All you can focus on is the wonderful instructions you will be getting, and there will be plenty of rewind and replay opportunities for you. So the thing that counts, which is not me, but it's how I do things, that you can watch over and over. But I got to be in this video after all, it's my video. So, having said that much, too much probably, enjoy the following instructions. The first shot we're going to show you here is just going to be in a wide angle. We're not going to zoom into this, but don't worry, you'll get a close-up and see what is happening later on. But I just wanted to show you the timing for pulling thin stringer with pliers. You can use tweezers, but I use needle nose pliers here. These are from Ace Hardware, and I'm not going to get any money from mentioning this here, but these are my favorite needle nose pliers. You can use tweezers. Needle nose pliers are just easier to handle. So you melt the glass, hold your rod in a 45-degree angle upwards, and melt about a pea-size amount. And we're going to show you this closer in the next shot. So melt a pea-size amount, take it out of the flame, grab it with the pliers, and then pull it out. And how fast you pull, I mean the speed with your pull, how you say that gives you the thickness of the stringer. The faster you pull, the thinner your stringer is going to be. And see how I'm holding my glass rod and my stringer and my tweezers in my needle nose pliers in one straight line. That is very important to do this. And it does not matter how you hold your stringer. You can hold it like this, you can pull out straight, you can pull upside down, as long as all your tools and your glass forms a straight line. In this shot you're going to see how you melt the ball. Maybe Dawn, you can pull out a little bit and show how the hand, what the hand is doing, the left hand. See how I'm rotating this glass rod, but I'm just going ever so slightly back and forth, so you don't have to get a full rotation. You just want to gently roll the glass rod back and forth to balance the glass. And again, when you pull a thin stringer, you only need about a pea-size amount of glass at the tip of your rod. And now we're going to pull closer in and show you how you grab it with the pliers. Okay, so take it out of the flame, wait about a second, grab it with the pliers, and then you start to pull. And the thickness you pull in the first inch, that should be the thickness of your entire stringer. So you pull, and then when you're done, you hold it for a second or two to let the stringer get stiff, and then you take it, and then you look at the stringer. This is where it comes out of the rod. See how much thicker it is down there. So you don't nip it off down here. You look at where the stringer up here is about the same thickness throughout, and this is where you grab it with your tweezers and just wiggle it ever so slightly. And the cold tool will chill the stringer off and break it. So this is not a mechanical break, it's called chilling it off. So just by the difference in temperature, this stringer will break. And this time I'm gonna focus on the length of the stringer, because you might have wondered why all my stringers were only about a foot long, because you're probably used to pulling stringer that are 3-4 feet long, as wide as your, as far as your arms come apart. And that is something that I'm very, I focus a lot on the size of the stringer I want to pull rather than the length, because even if you pull a 3 or 4 foot long stringer, you can't use a stringer that is that long, so you're going to break it into parts, into pieces anyway. So you might as well just pull your stringer that perfect length to begin with. So again, I make my pea-size amount, and I want to pull a thinner stringer this time, very thin. So I grab it quickly, and I'm just starting to pull earlier. And this time I can pull, and I can pull, and I can get about this much. So this is what, 3 feet. And then a lot of people might wonder, why do I break off my stringer rather than melting it off? Because a lot of people, they would do this. They would go in the flame and melt their stringer off in the flame. The problem with that is, can you zoom in here, Dawn? Can you show that? Oh, yeah. The problem with that is, you get a ball at the end of the stringer. And most of my stringer decoration starts out with the straight edge of the stringer. So this ball would actually be bothering me. And when you melt off, you always have either a thin point. I mean, I show it again, when you melt this off and pull it apart. So you're going to have like a little thin curved edge here at the edge of the stringer. Whereas if you break the stringer off like this, then you have a very straight edge, if you're lucky. The stringer we have pulled so far are fairly thin stringer. I don't know whether you can see, but these are about 1 millimeter thick, and this one is even thinner. And I use this type of stringer a whole lot for curled, for swirly stringer decorations. But there are times where you want to pull, where you want to have thicker stringer. This thickness here is 2 to 3 millimeters, and you see these are about a foot long and perfectly straight. And these are store-bought stringer. You can buy most colors these days you can buy ready-made stringer. They're quite a bit more expensive than the glass by the pound. But if you have colors that you use very often, like white or certain transparents or ivory, I actually always have half a pound of this store-bought stringer. But sometimes you want to be able to pull a thick stringer in the color you want. And that's when you use the next method, and this is what I call pulling stringer with punty. And this here is also a store-bought transparent. It's a clear stringer, which what I'm doing, I'm cutting this into pieces of about where's that, John? 3 inches?
Oh, close.
So
close.
I'm preparing this, and I have a whole jar of these short punties sitting on my desk. And this is what I use instead of the tweezers to hook up, because if you pull a thick stringer with the tweezers, and I'm gonna show that on, and you have your ball of glass, and then you grab it with the tweezers, and you have a thick amount of glass here between your tweezers. Actually, the cold tool and the hot glass will at some point, when you pull, will chill the glass so much that you're in danger of breaking this off while you're pulling. So it's much easier to pull a thick stringer with a punty like this. So that's what we're going to do now. One of the reasons I'm using Moretti for the punties instead of borosilicate is that when you see this is the stringer that we actually going to pull after this. This is the marvel of modern editing. So we're going backwards in time. But you can see here that where the stringer and the punty are attached, this actually formed a fairly good constant attachment. So I can use this stringer while holding onto the punty, and I can use it all the way down to here. Whereas if I would use a borosilicate punty, this one would break off here after it's cooled off because it's not compatible, and so I would hold, when I'm working, I would have to hold my stringer like this, and then I could only use about this much of the stringer. So by being able to hold the punty instead of the stringer, I can use my punty almost all the way to the end. So this is much more economical to use. The most important part when you pull a really thick stringer is to have a sufficient amount of glass when you start out. A lot of time when I'm teaching this or when I do this with my students, we always start out a class by pulling stringer, because then I can get an idea of how people can, how they can handle the glass, and also we need stringer throughout the class, so we're basically preparing our weapons to what we're going to do throughout the class. And if you ever teach people, actually this first exercise is just rotating the glass in the flame and getting a big gather of glass. Is a wonderful exercise to start for people who have never touched glass and have never made a bead before, because this will give them an idea of how hot the glass gets and what they have to do, how they have to balance the glass. Because can you show my hand down here, Dawn? See how you have to kind of rotate your hand. So you don't have to really rotate like in one direction, but you just gently go back and forth with your hand, just one rotation, so that this gather of glass that you have in the flame gets heated throughout. And depending on the amount, you can let it fall onto the glass, you can let it fall backwards like this. But then you have to always put heat on the back of the gather so that the entire blob gets really heated thoroughly throughout. And you will be amazed of how much glass you need for a foot-long thick stringer. So if I pull a thick stringer, I usually don't even pull an entire foot long. So once you have about what is this, like a raisin size, a small grape size, about half an inch in diameter here, you start heating the tip of your punty, and I'm gonna blob it on the table here. I just kind of tapped it onto a cold surface. Can you see this? I'm getting what's called a Maria. This is kind of like a little bumper here on the edge of the punty, and that prevents your glass from sticking into this glass ball. You kind of, you can attach it to the side like this. Does it show up? Okay, so keep this warm. Your punty has to be warm in order to attach to the glass. You don't want it molten, but you want it warm. So you heat it up here in the higher part of the flame. Now you're gonna take your glass ball out of the flame, and you balance it for a few seconds, and then you attach it to the punty like this, and you still don't pull, just balance it. Keep it balanced until the skin forms. You see how the color comes back, and now you very gently pull it apart. And it doesn't matter which side is up, whether the punty is up or the rod is up, whatever size, where you have more glass. See, now I'm flipping it over because I had more glass on the left hand side. You always want to have the bigger amount of glass upwards, because heat rises up and goes into the gather of glass and allows you to pull it out more. So see how I have a fairly short but thick stringer, and again, just like before, I kind of look at where it's the size I want, and this is where I break it off. And see how I chilled with the cold tweezers. I chilled the stringer and broke it off like this. I'm going to show you this part of this pulling thick stringer one more time with a different color, because the biggest difficulty that people have is knowing when to start to pull. Most of my students start pulling their thick stringer too early, and then they get in a kind of a panic because they start, they have this big wobbly amount of glass between their hands. And so I just want to focus on this and show you how you can fix, how you can deal with your glass if you start pulling too early. So again, I have my fairly big gather, and I'm not going to make it as big as the last one. And I preheat my punty. And so what people would do is they would take it out, balance it a little bit, and then they would start pulling and see how it pulls into a lump. So, see, you get completely out of control. But you can start blowing onto the part that gets too soft. By blowing on something, that part chills off, and the part that is still glowing is pullable. So that was a panic pull, but a lot of people pull this way, so they start too early. You should have waited about 3 or 4 seconds longer. And well, this one I would actually probably melt off or chill off. So you can melt off 6 stringer, but again, just as with the white stringer that I showed you before, when you melt off a stringer, it will give you a very uneven edge. So again, I would rather break it off and have a very clean edge to work with. This is a third method that I never really use for making regular stringer, but it's actually very handy if you don't have good needle nose pliers or if you don't have any punties. You take 2 rods of the same color and just melt the 2 ends and hold them together in the flame and fuse the rods together like this. And then you're building up a gather between these 2 rods and pulling your stringer out from that. You can use this for any size stringer. You can use this for making thin stringer or thick stringer. Just if you want to make thin stringer, you melt a small amount. If you want to make a thick stringer, you melt a larger amount. And I'm going to make a medium-sized stringer here. And this is very handy, or being able to pull a stringer like this will be a very good exercise for when you make encased stringer or even morini later on, because this is basically what you will end up whenever you make encased stringer or even cane. You're going to have 2 full-size punties in each hand, and you have a gather suspended in the middle. Sounding very scientific here. You have a blob of glass, a blob of molten glass that you have to be able to balance between 2 rods. Okay, now I have enough glass. Now you might want to pull out a little bit, Dawn. So you take this out and you wait a little. You wait 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, depending on the thickness of the rod you want, the stringer you want to pull. And then you start pulling. And this is just ended up being about a 2 millimeter stringer. I didn't really know what size stringer I wanted to pull this. But you get only about a foot. I only got about a foot, so if I wanted to have a thinner stringer, I would have pulled faster and got a longer stringer. So this is a way of pulling stringer without using a tool that is pretty neat, actually. I've never done this before, but it works. Okay, I bought a bunch of beads. Before we go on to the next chapter, which is on making encased stringer, I wanted to show you some examples of what it will look like to have encased stringers and why you want to make encased stringers. The most popular, the most regular use I do of encased stringers is this type of bead here. This is it's called the rose cane. A lot of people are doing this, and you can see here how you just basically make a spiral of this encased stringer, and the encasement layer will make this look, make this dark pink line here. And this is Rubino Oro over white. This is what we're going to do. And this is a fairly thick layer of encasing. You see how you get this rich pink color. I'm going to show you a different bead, this one here. You see the pink line around this barrel. This is also Rubino Oro over white. And this is a color that would be almost impossible to get in any other way, because there is no real nice opaque pink. But this pink, as you can see in the difference with the other one, where did it go? With this one here, it's a much lighter pink because I used a thinner layer of encasing. So you can alter the color or the hue you get with an encased stringer depending on how much glass you use for that layer. Here's another example of how I use the same cane, the same pink encased stringer. And this is also encased green stringer, and you can see that where, for example, those green lines meet, where they crisscross, you still have, there's some light on there, you still have kind of a definition. You can see which line is on top of the other one. If you would just use a green stringer for that, at the point where these stringers meet, you would just have like one in the same color. You wouldn't get this impression of one color is laying on top of the other color. So that's where it's important to make an encased stringer. You can also show you one more example here on this orange bead. You see how thin this orange line looks. That is because it is a white, it's an orange color encased in a transparent orange. So the transparent orange disappears a little bit on top of the space, and so the stringer looks a lot thinner than it actually is. So you can, if you want to make stringer control and you don't have quite as much control with a very thin stringer, you can make an encased stringer and hope that visually the encasement layer disappears and that your eye gets a little bit fooled by only seeing the really thin core of the stringer. And so what you want to do is you want to warm up the white rod. And this is like you're holding the white rod like this, as if this were a mandrel. So if I can show here my hand. So you're holding it in the rotating grip, so you can rotate this away from yourself. So you just hold this white rod as if it was the mandrel, and you're holding your pink rod like a pencil. So you can go back and forth, you can rotate it like back and forth in your fingers. And you warm up about 3/4 of an inch of this white rod, and then you heat the tip of the pink, the gold pink, and then you touch it about 3/4 away and start coiling your pink around the white as if you're winding glass onto a mandrel. And the problem here is that the white rod cannot be in the flame, so you have to be fairly far away from the flame, and we're going to show this from the side too, to show you exactly where the rod wants to be. But in order to make this pink glass glow, and in order to bring the pink glass, make this melt, you have to rock the rod back and forth. And if you can show this on my hand now, we can edit this. See how I'm actually kind of forcing. I'm rocking the pink rod with my right hand, and I'm going back and forth, rocking it back and forth and pushing it down. This way it melts, but I'm also mechanically pushing it down because there's not really enough heat to melt this pink rod. And then I'm pushing it down towards the coil underneath. And so I'm gonna hold this for a second so you can see what this looks like. You see how I have these different layers. And of course in reality I wouldn't be holding this out of the flame this long. But you see that I'm trying to overlap the layers. Here one layer slightly overlaps the other layer. And that way I'm trying not to trap any air, and I'm getting a really nice dense pink color. Oh, and now I got a little bit too cold here. So I'm pushing the pink rod onto the edge of the white. And now what I'm having here is like a gather of glass with a punty on each side. This is the white punty, and I'm using the pink as the punty. And I'm going back in the flame, and this is very difficult for a lot of beginners because the pink and the white have a different rate of heating. The white will get soft much earlier than the pink. Pink is a rubino oro here, is a fairly stiff color. And you see how when I rotate this and heat the gather in the middle, how the flame of the minor burner, which is a fairly wide flame, goes to the edge of the pink and to the edge of the white. So instinctively I'm holding this a little bit further to the pink to prevent the white from melting. And I'm going to show you why, because what happens, see, if I have the white here, the white edge in the flame, the white will actually get soft fairly early. Oops. And see how the joint gets thinner there? So the white rod would actually pull out earlier than the pink rod. So what you can do is you can pull it out a little bit like this and keep the white rod out of the flame. So now my gather is really good in orange, and I can take it out of the flame and start pulling out as if this was a thick stringer. And again, like the larger amount of glass, wherever that is, I hold upright. And I pull this into about 1.5 to 2 millimeter. And pull, and this is like, oh, it won't pull anymore. So this is a fairly, and then lay this down on the table, and I cut it off on one side here, and cut it off down here to have a fairly thick size stringer. You see, this is the stringer we just pulled, and it's a really thick and dense pink color. And with this coiling method, you just get a very, a thick encasing. So I want to show you another method where you can get a much thinner layer, also without the danger of trapping air, because you can't really see that, but if you would look very closely, you can see just ever so small amount of air being trapped in here, because when you coil glass, there's just nothing, there's no way you can make sure that there is absolutely no air trapped. So the next method, the second method of making an encased stringer, is a method that Lawrence Stump would approve of. It's actually the way that Morinis are made, and I would call this painting on. So just the same as before, you warm your white rod, but don't let it get soft. You want this rod to be stiff, and you heat the tip of your Rubino or of your pink rod. And then by holding this the white in a fairly steep upright angle, you paint from top to bottom. You paint down, you push down, then you bring it back into the flame and melt it off. And you only want to get about 3/4 of an inch. You don't paint too much down because you're running out of warm glass. So again, then you overlap the first layer and melt it off. So you stripe from top to bottom like this, and push downwards, and then hold it in the flame and burn it off. But you don't want to hold the white in the flame while you're painting your glass on. So again, you overlap the layer before, melt it, and then you quickly hold it in the flame, burn it off. And keep this warm. And you can also go on the other end of where you started your layers, stripe it on, burn it off. And you go one round around the whole white rod, and keep this warm in between, but make sure that the white doesn't get soft. And then one more layer in between here, and stripe it down, and now you have the entire rod covered. And then you punty up. You can pull out a little bit, Dawn. You punty up here, and then you melt this painted part in the center. And I heat from the right towards the left. So you start on the right and then slowly move to the left, because if there was any air trapped in between these layers, these striped layers that you painted upside down, they would have time now to escape on the left hand side. You see how I pulled the glass slightly outwards, and that's how I created these tunnels, these kind of air tunnels, air pockets, where the air could escape if you heat it from right to left. It can get out of these little pockets there that I created. So you heat this gather, and get ready to pull out in a stringer. And again, just like by the first time, stay away from the white rod. You don't want to get too close with the flame to the white rod, or that will melt first. So take it out of the flame, balance, and then pull out and hold the two rods in a straight line with the stringer suspended in between. And hold it long enough so that you know that it's stiff, and nip it off. A quick comparison to show you the difference in color that you get. This is the first stringer we pulled, and this is the second stringer we pulled, and it's the same color. This looks almost white, but when you use it, it will definitely show up as a light pink. But that is just the difference in using the same colors, but two different methods of applying the glass around and making a encased stringer will give you a completely different hue. The next thing we're going to do is show you how to make reduction frit stringer, and here are some examples where I've used reduction frit stringer. here the stringer is applied in dots, and on this little barrel down here on the side it's very similar design to the pink barrel that I showed you before, but here I used reduction frit stringer. And then, oh, this is iris gold, this color here, and then when you reduce it, it looks this kind of copperish golden color. And then this one here is, I think it is silver blue reduction frit stringer on a base of copper green, and I have this one I made at a party, at a bead party somewhere, and I have not been able to reproduce this color ever since. So the theory is it's iris blue reduction frit on copper green, but I've never managed to make this the same color combination look this nice. You see, this is all just stringer on copper green, pressed into a lentil with a lentil tool with a Corina bead stamp, of course, and then reduced. And then this one here, this bead, I made at a class the other day. This is a really cool effect. This is some of Val Cox's reduction frit, and it's called, I forgot what it's called. It's it's Ocelot Spot mix. And these were just stringer pulled with this Ocelot Spot frit, which has chunks of different color, and then it's applied on light ivory, and then it's reduced, and then the flame was brought back into a regular oxidizing flame, or a neutral flame, and this is this cool kind of Klimtish artsy effect here. So these are all things you can do with reduction frit stringer, and I'm going to show you now how to make that. Okay, I have two things prepared for this. It's a jar of reduction frit stringer. This is iris gold, and it's a large size. This works best with a large size. And then I have a rod of borosilicate, just 4 to 5 millimeter borosilicate glass that we're going to use for the punty. So, and then I have a brass. This is one of my lentil molds. It's the bottom of that, but you can just basically pour it onto a graphite marver or a bead mold or whatever you have. And then I heat the tip of the borosilicate. And the reason why you use borosilicate as a punty is that reduction frit is not Moretti. It's actually most of the time it's Kugler or Reichenbach or other German glass, which is a little bit stiffer than Moretti. So if you would use Moretti as a punty, the punty would melt first before the reduction frit would melt. So this is actually a time where using Pyrex or borosilicate makes more sense. So I bring the tip of this Pyrex to a glow, and then kind of frontally dip it into this and pick up a few kernels of this reduction frit. And then bring it back in the flame and melt it to the glass. And make sure that it kind of melts to the front of the punty, not around the side. And then just keep dipping it into the frit and picking up more frit with the piece that you already have in place on the top of the punty. And just keep picking up a few pieces. Sometimes they will jump off, you know, if you get a big piece. So make sure that you have good eye protection as usual. And you only need it depending on what you want to do with the stringer. I always go for my piece size, so this is about all I want to pick up the first time. So I can set this down, and then I'm going to hold this in my left hand. And now this is just like pulling, like basically pulling a regular thin stringer. So you melt this glass. Have your needle nose pliers ready, and you might want to pull back a little bit. Take it out of the flame, grab it with the tip of the needle nose pliers, and pull it out into a stringer. And that's all you have to do, and then you can just use it like a regular stringer, and I'm going to show you later on how you reduce this. This type of stringer we're going to pull is called silvered ivory stringer, and this necklace has a few examples of how you can use this, so you know what we're making. This bead here, you see I used the silvered ivory stringer as a little accent stripe on the outside here. This type of bead is, I call this cosmic fudge. This is just silvered ivory stringer rolled on a core of ivory and then encased in clear. And this bead here is some silvered ivory string on a core of inked blue, and then I made some encased florals, and I made some flower beads, and then I encased the whole thing. So it's just a nice example of you know, how you can use silvered ivory stringer to add a little organic looking touch to a bead. What we need to make silvered ivory stringer is a booklet or one sheet of silver foil. Then you have a marver prepared, graphite marver, and a rod of dark ivory. And you can do this with light ivory and silver leaf, but it looks best with the silver foil and dark ivory. And silver foil is actually so thick that you can use it, you can take your hands and pull a piece out like this. So prepare your piece and lay it on the marver. And then you heat, oops, this happens when you don't preheat your rod. Ivory is pretty shocky, so be prepared that you've got these pieces of glass flying around when you hold this in the flame. So melt a blob of glass, and when I pull stringer, I hold the rod in my left hand and pull with my right hand, but I'm rolling it in silver first. So I'm going to do this reversed first here. So melt about a double pea size, depending on how much of this you want to pull or how thick you want the stringer to be. So make this ivory and let it cool a little bit. You know, you don't want to touch it directly to the silver. And then once it's not droopy anymore, you roll it in the silver and you kind of push it down. This is called burnishing it into the ivory. So roll it on the marver and then change hands and go back in the flame and melt the silver in or off. Usually people say melt the silver off, but the silver doesn't really go anywhere. And this is one of the things, because there is some fume coming off. You want to make sure that you have, oops, losing focus here. You want to make sure that you have good ventilation when you work with silver. And then once this is molten, take it out of the flame, and now we're going to pull it out in the stringer. So grab it with the needle nose pliers and just pull out into a stringer. And you have to be really careful, this stuff is very brittle. So hold it there, wait until it's cold, and then you want to cut it into short pieces. Cut these pieces a little bit shorter than you would regular stringer, because they're going to break off when you work with them. So they are very brittle because of the silver and the ivory. And that's it. Okay, these are a few examples here of designs that are made with the thick stringer around the belly of the bead. So the belly of the bead, I mean the middle of the bead here. So you see this is a black bead that has a white stripe around the center, and then the black applied in 4 dots around the middle, and this is the white stringer in the center here. And I have a lot of designs where I use this. You can see like here, for example, that's a red bead with a black belt around the center and white stringer designs on that. Or in this strand here, there's a number of designs. For example, this one here, and this we're going to make as one of the next exercises. This is it's not a twisted cane around the center, but it's an ivory stringer, and then the stringer laid on sideways. This is another example here of a design with a thick stringer. So this is a technique that is really useful. Or in this bracelet here, see, I painted a green stringer around the belly of the bead and then dipped that in green reduction frit. So being able to apply thick stringer around a bead is a really good exercise. You know, if you haven't used a lot of stringer yet, you don't have an idea what stringer control means. So we start out with using a thick stringer. In this first shot, we're going to just show you the position of the bead in the flame and how you hold the stringer. So hold your bead just in the regular rotating grip, and the stringer just the way you would hold a glass rod. And then keep the bead warm and heat the tip of the stringer about two inches away from the flame, and then touch it to the bead and have the bead underneath the flame, and the stringer is to the right hand side, and apply pressure downwards on the stringer. I'm pushing down ever so slightly, and see how the stringer is not glowing. And that's very important. If your stringer is glowing, you're basically working too hot, and back off out of the flame. And just see how I'm making these small pushing movements downwards. And there it meets the other stringer, and then pull it away to like a little tail. And then melt it flush to the bead. And that's all it takes. The side shot should give you a good idea of where you hold the bead, how close you get to the flame. So you heat the tip of the stringer and touch it to the bead, and see how far your bead is underneath the flame. Be about 2 inches above from the tip of the torch. And just pull it downwards, putting pressure onto the stringer downwards, and then you pull it out into a trail. And then all you do is melt it in. The next exercise, and I really call this exercise, is something that I always do in my classes before we start with the swirly stringers. Because the problem with stringer decoration is that, and maybe you can zoom in a little bit down here, is that people think of a stringer as a pen or a brush. So when they want to decorate a bead, and this bead is cold here, so it's not gonna crack. When they want to decorate a bead, they think that they move the stringer like this, or whatever they think this is what they have to move. In the way that I apply my stringer, it's not the stringer that moves, but it's the bead that moves. And this next exercise of applying stringer sideways is a very good exercise to kind of teach your brain to move the bead instead of moving the stringer. And this might sound goofy, but although the students are aware that they have to move the bead and not the stringer, they're still moving the stringer. And when I come around and I say, hey, move the bead, don't move the stringer, they say, I know, I want to do that, but my hands don't. My hands want to move the stringer. So this is a good practice. And I made this is the bead we made before with the ivory band, the dark ivory band around. And this is a dark aqua stringer that I pulled, a thin stringer. And as you can see how I'm holding my bead here. Usually when we make the bead, we mentioned that we're going to hold the bead in the rotating grip like this. When you apply glass, you hold your bead like this, and when you make the thick string around, you hold your bead like this. But when you decorate the bead, you want to switch your hand around. And you can try this without a flame. You flip your hand over, you hold the bead like the mandrel like this, and then flip it over so that your hands are beneath the mandrel and your thumb is in front. And what that allows you is to move the bead freely back and forth. If you would hold the bead like this, and then it's very hard on your wrist to move the bead like this. So if you flip the mandrel over, it's very easy to just go to the left side of the bead, to the right side, just a very quick flip of your hand. And the right hand side you hold just like you hold the rod in a pencil grip. And now once we start making this bead, and we have a flame here, of course I'm going to use a different bead than this one. But the idea that you want to get and that you want to focus on in the first shot is holding the stringer in the same position and moving the bead underneath the stringer. So that's something that is very difficult for your brain to understand it has to do. And this exercise, this bead that we're going to make now, will be perfect for your brain to kind of understand the concept of moving the bead. So now we actually have a hot bead here, and what you want to do is you heat the tip of the stringer and touch it to the black glass and fold it over underneath the flame. So we're going to zoom in a little bit and show you a detail of that, but kind of for the first part, focus on the hands. Heat the stringer, touch it to the black, and fold your bead underneath the stringer and melt it. So now we're going to try and get a little bit closer with the camera. Alright, so see here how flame throws the focus off a little bit. we're going to do this again, and I'm going to just kind of randomly place stripes next to each other. Touch the black on the side and move the bead underneath the flame. And neither the bead nor the flame is in the heat. No, that didn't make any sense. Neither the bead nor the stringer is in the flame. They are both not glowing. If they are glowing, you're too hot. There is enough flame or enough heat underneath the flame to melt the size stringer without actually being in the flame. And when you do this, make sure that you heat the back where you applied the stringer, because if you just concentrate on the front where you're going to place the stringer in the back might actually pop up. So heat the tip, touch the black and move the bead underneath the flame and melt off at the other side. And then put a little bit of heat to the stringers on the back. And also what happens if you would just place one stripe right underneath the next one, the glass down here, can you see that, Dawn? The glass down here would get too cold, would get too hot. Actually, when you apply the stringer, the flame hits the ivory down there. So if you would immediately apply your next stringer, it might smear the ivory underneath. So apply one stripe, carefully, give heat there, and then heat the back, which allows the front to cool off sufficiently for the next stripe to sit there clean. So I'm going to do this. And this, the concept of having the stringer not in the flame is very important to understand, because what you're basically doing is, it's like, imagine you're moving a feather with your breath, and your mouth is kind of the flame, but the breath is the heat underneath the flame. So in order to move a feather, blow a feather ahead of you, you don't have to touch the feather with your mouth either, because your breath is strong enough to move the feather. So think of the stringer as the feather that you're moving, and the heat that is here, the heat that is underneath the flame is like your breath. So touch the black on the side and fold the bead kind of from left to right underneath the flame and give heat to all of these stringers. And I don't really calculate how many stringers I'm placing here. Somehow they always end up being okay at the end. There are so many stringers around and you never really see the entire bead at once. So even if you're a little bit off in the spacing, it's not that bad. Okay, and this is the final stringer we place. And now you want to melt these flush, and what might have happened, and now I need a tool that I don't have, graphite paddle here. I want to give a little bit of heat to the end of the stringer here and touch them down to the bead with the tool, because they might roll backwards, because the right hand side of your bead might have gotten too cold, and these stringers would actually roll backwards on you. The ones on the left hand side usually are okay. So now that you have all your stringers in place, you might want to pull back a little. I'm actually changing back. See, this is the way I was holding the bead when I applied the string, and now I'm changing back to the rotating grip to melt the stringer decoration flat. This is a bead is much easier to rotate when you hold it like this in the rotating grip. But when you apply stringer, you want to hold it like this. And now all you do is just melt the surface of the bead. When I melt decoration flat, I usually rotate the bead back and forth. So I go a few rotations backwards and then I move in the other direction. That prevents the decoration from starting to spin in either direction. Okay, now everything is melted flush. And you can see that when this bead gets cold, once the glow fades, all you can see is, can you see this, Dawn? All you can see in this bead is the stringer, there we go, it's the stringer on top of the ivory. The stringer that is on top of the black to the right and left kind of disappeared in the black glass. So this is a really good beginner's bead, because usually when you apply stringer you always get a little bit bigger blob on either side, but because the bead is black, that bigger blob right and left disappears and all you see is the nice crisp line of the stringer over the ivory. Next exercise is actually a pretty cool exercise that will add one more difficulty. So we have laid 1/6 stringer around the bead, and then we have learned how to lay the stringer sideways. Now we're going to learn how to make thinner stringer around the bead. But we're going to start out with laying the stringer sideways at first, and this time I'm going to show you how you can actually space stringer instead of just randomly laying them next to each other. We're going to space this one. So the bead that I made here is an ivory bead, dark ivory, on a core of black. So you can see that I have a little bit black down here, and that gives me a kind of a landing strip for my stringer. So I do the same thing. I heat the tip of the stringer, touch it to the black, and then fold it over to the other side until I land back in the black. And now in order to space, I want to make four, kind of touch it down a little bit there. I want to make four, and this is ink blue stripes around this. So I'm turning the bead over, and can you see here the opposite side of where that stringer is, of where the first stringer is. So I'm placing my, got too cold there. See what happens when the back side is too cold, when you talk too much. The stringer doesn't stick to it. So you have to make sure that your bead is warm. And that's something that will very likely happen to you. So preheat the bead, touch the stringer, and then fold it over. So that was an important blurb there. And also what you can do, see how my stringer didn't really start in the ivory, does that show up there? So you can heat that, and then with the stringer itself as a tool you can pull it back into the black there. So you can pull the stringer forward a little bit. So now you have basically cut your bead in half. I'm going to point it at you here. See how you have the bead cut in half with the stringer. And now the next stringer you can lay in the space in between these two. So you cut your bead visually into 4 pieces. So preheat the spot where the stringer is going to sit, and just the same as before, fold it over. Keep all the other stringers warm, and place your 4th line on the opposite side in between the first 2 stringers. Okay, now you want to pull back a little bit, otherwise, okay. And then you melt these flush. So we have 4 ink blue stripes around the bead. And the next stringer I'm going to apply around the bead, but you have to make sure that the first stringers in place are actually melted flat. You cannot apply a stringer on top of a raised stringer, because where the 2 stringers meet, the second stringer wouldn't have contact with the bead and would melt right off. The second color that I'm using is that dark transparent aqua that we used in the first bead. And now I'm keeping my bead, and I hope you can see that my stringer is to the right here. Can you pull out a little bit, Dawn, to show where the hands are? See, I'm holding my stringer. You can almost, it's so thin that you can almost not see this. And the first shot we're going to do is a wide angle to see how my hands are and where I'm positioned in the flame. So I'm going to place a band or a stringer around the center of the bead, and so you heat the tip of the stringer and you touch it into one of the ink blue. And the bead is underneath the flame, the stringer is to the right, and just as we did with the thick ivory stringer, you apply pressure to the bead, to the stringer. Your stringer is kind of pushing downwards, and visually I just move from one purple stripe to the other. So by having the purple stripes in place already, you don't have to think about laying the stringer all the way around the bead, because you only have to, you think of this as a ladder. You move from rung to rung to rung, and that gives you a visual aid of where you want to go. So for the next one, I'm actually switching my position, my hand position here, and now you might want to zoom in a little bit. Dawn, I don't know whether you can see this. We're going to lay the next stripe on the left hand side here. So just kind of see the speed with which I'm working, and I'm pointing the bead away from me. So the first stripe was applied like this. Now I'm angling the bead so I can actually see what I'm doing. So heat the tip of the stringer, touch it to the bead, and the bead is underneath the flame and the stringer is to the right, and I push pressure on downwards. And I just move from one purple stripe to the next. Ever so slowly. The stringer is not glowing. If your stringer is glowing, you're too close in the flame. And for the next, for the stripe on the other side, and just keep these warm, so make sure they don't pop off. And I started the same purple stripe I started with the second one, and attach it to the bead, and now the bead is pointed at myself. So I can see where I'm doing, and the flame is not touching the other stringers that are already in place. And put pressure on the bead. And we're going to show you this from a sideways angle too. We're going to do this over with the different camera angles so you see exactly what's going to happen. So now this was dark aqua, and now I'm going to melt these flat. And the bead could be done at this point, but I'm just going to apply one more stripe sideways. Actually, should we call this a bead? But if you wanted to make a true plaid bead, you could actually now apply stripes this way again. I'm just going to do it one more time. And you don't have to do, this is not, I just go from left to right and start out in the black and just put one more stripe in the interval between the first ink blue stripes and stringers that you put into place. And the most important thing to keep in mind when you make this kind of plaid beads is that every time you apply a row of stringers, the one underneath has to be molten flat. You cannot apply raised stringer on top of raised stringer. And melt this flat, and the bead is done. And now we're going to do this. We're going to do the same thing from a side view again to show you how far the bead is underneath the flame and that the stringer is never in the flame. I'm going to let this cool off, and here is a plaid bead there. You see here, and that's a peculiarity of ink blue and aqua. You see here where the aqua was on top of the ink blue, there's actually a third color that gets created. So there's all of a sudden you have a lighter blue that shows up where the ink blue crosses where the aqua crosses the ink blue. And I've never seen any other color do this. It's only ink blue and aqua that have this weird effect of creating a third color when they cross. And it only happens when the ink blue is down and the aqua goes on top of that. So that's something you might want to keep in mind, because there are quite a few design possibilities you have with this effect of a third color being created by the overlapping of two colors. The next exercise that we're going to do is make a trailing line around a bead. This is a good example. Actually, this is probably one of the best beads I ever made with this. And you can see here that the line starts on one end and then goes continuously around the bead till the other end. The lines that we've made in the plaid bead before, like this here, those lines actually met on themselves and then were melted off. But a lot of times I make lines that go all the way around. And let me make sure here. You can do this in all colors. For example, in this bead I made this with a transparent line around a transparent bead. This was a white line on a black bead. And in this example, and in all these lines here, I left the stringer raised. And this is an encased purple stringer on top of a purple bead. This one here would be an example for a light orange line on a darker orange base. So there's very little contrast here. And then after the line was melted in, after the stringer was melted in, I pressed this into a lentil shape. The colors you want to use depends of course on your taste, but try in the beginning to stay away from soft colors like white and ivory. They are much harder to apply, so focus either on transparent lines around a transparent bead or encased stringer. Encased stringer is also a very good exercise for this. And when you use colors like this, for example transparent on transparent, sometimes transparent doesn't stick very well on certain colors. I have a very hard time making lines stand up on teal colored beads, for example. So you might want to experiment a little bit, but some colors are more prone to breaking off than others. Whereas usually a line sticks very well on a base bead of the same color. Like this bead here, or this bead down here, was made on an ink blue base bead, and the stringer is encased in ink blue, and ink blue by itself bonds very well. So the same color bead bonds well to the same colored stringer. For this exercise bead, I made a black bead and I used one of the pink stringers, one of the pink Encased stringers we used in the beginning. And one of the tricks of making this continuous line is to hold the stringer that you're going to apply as far behind, as far in the back as possible. If you can see this here, I'm trying to hold the entire length of the stringer that I'm going to apply in my hand, because if you hold it like this down here and then, you know, as you wind it around, you're going to run out of stringer, so you have to move your hand backwards, and that makes little jerky movements where your stringer is going to get out of alignment, so to speak. So holding it far backwards is one of the tricks, and then you kind of make sure that your hand rests. If you can see here, my arm rests on the table, so I'm keeping my hand very stable. And I'm holding the bead in the rotating grip, holding the metal in the rotating grip, and then I heat the tip of the stringer, and it's kind of get a little bit jerky there, and touch that to the very left side of the bead. And then I'm pointing the left side of the bead towards me so I can see what I'm doing, and I start rotating the bead away from myself. And as I'm winding this and I'm putting pressure onto the stringer, I'm pushing downwards, and the stringer is not in the flame. And now as I'm trailing around the bead, I'm changing the angle of the bead. You see how now the bead is kind of facing to the front, and I'm not doing anything with my right hand other than just moving the stringer closer to the bead as I'm running out of stringer. And I'm slowly nudging it towards the flame. And now I'm actually have to change the angle of the bead further to the other side. Now the right hand side of the bead is pointing towards me. And continuously I put pressure on the stringer. And now I got all the way around. See that you have to be in the same spot of the flame at all times, otherwise you lose momentum. Basically you can only do this if you just go around in one fluid motion. And we're going to show you this again from the side angle, that you see where the stringer is and where the bead is. And if you want to leave the stringer raised, what you do is you heat the stringer after you have applied it. Just kind of go gently in the flame and look at the stringer. You can see when the stringer has bonded with the surface. So bring the stringer to a slight glow, but don't hold it continuously in the flame. Just make sure that every part of the stringer, especially on the right hand side here, where the bead was cooler, gets to glow once, and that the stringer has a chance to bond with the surface, otherwise it will pop off. And if you go too far in this process, if you melt it too far, then you'll just melt in the entire bead, and then you have a flat stringer. So we're doing the same thing again. I'm heating the tip of the stringer and touch it as far left to the bead as possible, which you can't see. And then I'm pushing downwards onto the stringer and trying to find that perfect spot underneath the flame and trying to hold it there. Try to just stay in that, what they call the sweet spot, and then just rotate your bead underneath the flame and put pressure on the stringer. If you look at the stringer, you can see that it's actually bent downwards ever so slightly. And you can only do this if your stringer is not getting really soft, because if you get your stringer too soft and you push downwards, you will pull the stringer thinner. Okay, getting closer to the end. And I'm pointing the bead more towards myself, because otherwise that part of the bead is going to be very cold and the stringer is not going to stick to it. When you're done, you melt it off. And what you can do, you see how I have a little ball here at the end. Can you see that in the flame, Don?
Mm-hmm.
See this little ball? You can heat up the tip of your stringer and then heat just that ball and touch it with the stringer and pull it away, and then you pull this thread away. So you can use your stringer oftentimes as a tool to correct little oops moments that you had. So if you left too much glass behind, warm up the stringer that you used and pull it away in one swift moment, and that way you take that excess glass away with you. The next exercise, I don't have any beads to show you, so I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to do the teacher on the drawing board thing. So if you think as a zigzag line, you would draw from left, left, right, left. So this is very easy to do with a pen. But if you have a stringer, you would think that the flame would be on the one side of the bead. So this would be your stringer line that you had to draw. So if you draw like this, you go away from the flame, and then you would have to go into the flame, away from the flame, into the flame. This going into the flame with a stringer is much, much harder than going away from the flame. So instead of thinking of this as a zigzag line, what you do mentally, you think in connecting dots. So you would think this is 1 point and 1 point, and these are the points of the zigzag line that you have to connect. And you would draw the first stringer away from the flame, the second stringer away from the flame, away from the flame, and you always go away from the flame. There are designs where you have to go into the flame, like in a spiral, for example. There will always be a point where you go into the flame, away from the flame, into the flame. But we get to that later. But for now we want to concentrate on how you can pull this one off, that you always go away from the flame and you still get this impression of a zigzag line. So we're going to do this on glass with a stringer now. Okay, this is just, I just wanted to show you how you think and not really how to make a design. So heat the tip of the stringer, and you have to make sure that your bead is fairly warm so that the stringer actually sticks to it. You will notice that if your bead is cold, the stringer won't stick to it. So heat the tip of the stringer and draw away from the bead, and then stop and melt that off. And heat that piece of stringer, because it's amazing how fast the stringer will roll backwards on itself. So the next stringer, you would start again on the left hand side and angle your flame at the end of the stringer that you already have in place. And again, with very little heat, just underneath the flame, go there. And you see how that stringer already, make sure we can see that in the flame here. See how the stringer pulled a little bit backwards. And we're going to repair the ends after we've got everything in place. So now the next stringer decoration, I start at that white stringer, and then I pull to the other side, and I'm going to make just a random zigzag line across the bead. Again, now we start from the left, and this is no particular pattern I'm doing. I'm not trying to teach you patterns to make. That is up to you. I just want to show you how you do something, and then what you turn that into, that is up to yourself, to your own imagination. So this one I'm going to start further left, and always point the stringer towards that other end where you want to end up, and keep the entire bead warm. Just remember that the stringer will pop off if you don't give heat on it. Okay, start at this side and pull over to the other side, burn off, keep the entire bead warm. And again, start on the left and angle the stringer towards that edge on the right where you want to be. And one more, and then I actually have these connected. And now when you heat this, you will see here, see where the first two stringers came together. Can you see that in the flame toward here? There. That is going to be a big ugly blob, so you can fix this again with using your stringer as a tool. So just heat the end there where these two stringer lines come together, and then under the flame, but I'm going to bring it in the front so you can see it. Pull this outwards with the stringer and then burn it off. And you see how I burned this, how I kind of pulled this towards a crisper edge. And you would do this with the entire bead. Just heat the tip of the stringer, and this stringer is getting so thin that it's breaking off, so I'm using a good thing I have a bunch of stringer prepared here. So use this tip of the stringer has to be warm, otherwise it will not stick to this end here. You have to work fairly fast, otherwise it will get cool and you won't have time to pull anymore. So heat this and pull it away. Pull it in the opposite direction, or in the direction where you want to go, so away from the V there, towards the tip of the V. And that way you can fix stringer decoration after the fact. my pile of sample beads is growing here, but almost the last thing I want to show you is how to make swirls with stringer. This is one example here, and this bead here is a good example of showing you. Can you see that? Yeah. The swirl going clockwise first, and then it changes direction and goes counterclockwise. Whereas this type of swirl, I added a bunch of swirls that always go clockwise. The same with this strand here. These are all swirls that are all going clockwise. For some reason I find that applying your stringer clockwise is a lot easier than going counterclockwise, because when you go this way you always swirl into the flame. So I start out going clockwise, and then I change direction later on, like here for example on this one. When you see, I start out clockwise and then I go in squiggle lines like this, and I end up going clockwise again. But this is a matter of taste really. If you're a left-handed person, you might find that it's easier to start everything counterclockwise because you're going to work on the opposite side of the flame. Unfortunately, I work a lot with my left hand, although I'm right-handed, but I have never managed to teach this to a left-handed person. I don't have that many different designs that I do the swirls with, but it's one of my favorites, little decorative items. You see here I used intense black stringer on ivory that gives you a very fine black line. So this bead here is very similar to this bead. The only difference is that this bead was an ivory bead that I rolled in silver before I applied the black line, and this is just the black line right on top of the ivory. So these are just a few samples. Oh, this bead here is kind of difficult to see. I have to hold this as an angle. You see this is an ivory line swirled clockwise on an ivory bead, and this is a very pretty design. Kind of difficult to make because the ivory gets so soft. So if you do this, again, stay away from ivory and white in the beginning because that will just drive you crazy. And stick to stiff colors that both in the background. You want your base bead to be a stiff color, so preferably make a transparent bead or a bead encased in transparent. And then do your stringer in a, let's see, like this one here. This one was made with turquoise or copper green stringer. Copper green is a nice color that you can pull very thin and that will stay stiff. So try to find colors for your decoration that are fairly stiff and easier to work with than ivory and white. Okay, the first take here, we're not going to zoom in, so you're not going to see a lot that is happening on the bead, but I want you to focus on my hands. Just want to see that I'm not turning the torch down. Just want you to get an idea of the position in the torch that I'm working at, and how I'm moving my hands, and that I'm not really moving my right hand here. And remember, I'm right-handed, but I'm heating the tip, so keep the bead warm so the stringer will stick to it. Heat the tip of the stringer and touch it to the bead where you want the decoration to begin. And then the main motion happens from the left-hand side, so I rotate right and counterclockwise, and I'm underneath the flame and to the right with the stringer. We're going to show you this in closer up later on, so don't worry if you're not seeing anything. Just focus on the movement of the left hand. See how I'm going into the flame with the bead towards the flame, but the stringer is not in the flame. So I'm just making these clockwise and counterclockwise swirls. And I'm moving the stringer a little bit with my right hand. I'm kind of guiding it. And you see how I'm going back in the flame with the stringer, just to make sure that the stringer is bonded. And at this point I don't really know whether the stringer decoration is going to stay raised or whether I'm going to melt it flat. I basically apply all my stringer decoration as if I would leave it raised. You see, the main motion comes from the left hand. The right hand applies pressure onto the stringer, down to the bead. Always push down onto the bead. Okay, so we're going to do this same thing again, viewed from the side. But this is the motion that you want. It's kind of like crocheting. So we're doing the same thing again, just for close-up. And I hope that the camera is not losing focus in between. Basically just keep pressure on the stringer. That is one of the most important things. And then once you have your design finished, heat the back of this. The stringer will pop off, and then before you place your next decoration, preheat the area where the stringer is going to go. Bring it to a glow and then let the glow fade, and then place your stringer. If the bottom of the bead, or if the bead is not hot enough, the stringer will not stick. And you see how I'm staying about on 1/3 of the bead. I'm not applying my swirly decoration in one motion around the entire bead, because while I'm working here, the back part of the bead is getting cold. So before I can place my stringer there, I want to heat this. So I always cut my bead visually in thirds and stick with the stringer decoration on 1/3 of the bead. And then make sure that the place where you're going to apply your stringer is heated before you get going with the stringer. And before you're done, let's say you wanted this decoration raised, just as with the trailing line, you just heat every little piece of the bead by itself. Just bring it to a glow. Make sure the stringer glows once, but don't heat it too much, otherwise your stringer decoration, otherwise your stringer decoration will go flat. I could melt this flat now, but if I would plan on making my stringer decoration flat instead of raised, I would use a thinner stringer, because when I melt this down, and I'm going to do it just to show you, this stringer is going to appear a lot thicker than it does when it's raised, because it's going to melt flat and spread on the surface. You see here how much thicker. See, this is the size of the stringer. The flat stringer looks a lot thicker than the stringer in a round form, just because the surface melts flat. Okay, we're going to do the same thing one more time from this side, just to show you that the bead is not in the flame, the stringer is not in the flame. You'll be amazed of how much heat there is underneath the flame. Oh, my stringer just broke off. Okay. Can you see this? Is my hand not in the way? Gone?
Yeah.
The next shot is kind of a little bit like a bonus shot, because basically you already have seen how to make a rose, because a rose is nothing but a swirl with this encased rose stringer that we made in the beginning, and you just make a tighter swirl, but I'm going to show that anyway. Somebody asked me for it. So heat the tip of your stringer and attach it to the bead, and then you swirl at the edge of the flame clockwise, and just make a very tight swirl, and you have to keep it out of the flame enough so that the base of the bead, the bead doesn't get hot and get smeared. This is a little bit more difficult actually, because the stringer you're working with is thicker, so a thicker stringer requires a little bit more heat to bring it to melt. Ooh! And you burn it off. I'm going to make another one. Heat the tip and swirl it around itself. And this one you have to nudge the bead in and out of the flame, because you need more heat to bring this to melt this thick stringer. actually working with a thinner stringer is easier in a way because you need less heat. So this one you have to go in and out of the flame, and then when you're done you pull, and see right now I pulled a little end here. So what you can do is you can take a tool and fold in the heat, with little heat, fold the end of this rose over and kind of bring it on top of itself. Keep these warm. Make one more. Also wants to come in. So make a tight swirl around itself. Keep it away from the flame. What's going on out there? And one last one. And probably this is not a good angle to see this. What do you think, Don?
I think we're going to do a side shot.
We'll do a side shot, yeah. See how I have to back out with the bead, because I can see that the base bead is getting too hot at some point. So if your bead is really glowing at some point, take it out of the flame and back off. And then take this and nudge it down with the tool. That's how you get the roses, either on top of the bead or encased. Well, I promised to show you what to do with reduction frit once you've pulled that into a stringer. So I made a bead here, and maybe Dawn you can pull in a little bit. I made a copper green bead with a raised reduction frit stringer, and I'm going to show you two ways of reducing this. And you have to pull out again a little bit. The first way is you have your regular neutral flame here, and then you just add a little bit more propane to it. You see, I don't know, does that show on the camera? You see how the flame changes? Yeah. And you just get a long yellow cone by adding more propane. You have to kind of show my finger here to see. It's like you have your regular flame, yeah, like that. And then you dial in more propane until you get about a 2-inch long orange cone in there, and then you bask your bead just about in the flame, that point where that orange cone ends. And that way it brings out the silver in the reduction frit. And I'm just going to take it out of the flame and show you. Can you zoom into that? Oops. You see how the stringer decoration turned kind of bluish silver. And now we're going to use the same bead. We're going to melt the reduction frit. We're going to melt the reduction frit flat and let it spread out a little bit. And then I'll show you a different way of reducing, which works better for me. This is something I learned from Kimberly Affleck. And up to that day, the reduction effect never really worked for me by the way, you know, turning up the propane and the way that it was written in the catalogs of the bead suppliers. And when Kimberly showed me that you just turn, oh, we're going to do this now. So I just melted the decoration completely flat, and then I let it get cold a little bit. Now I turn off my propane, my oxygen entirely, and I turn up the propane until it makes a really this kind of strong noise. You can see it here, and then I bask it for a few seconds in the upper part of the flame up here. Make sure you don't have a wall behind you where you could scorch the wall. Okay, now I turn that off, and the camera can show a little bit how strong a silver effect you get here. This is a little bit of a cheater way of applying stringer, but to tell you the truth, a lot of people are not able to apply a stringer the way I do, by having the torch this hot and then just working underneath and to the right of the torch. So what a lot of people do, including some pretty good bead makers that I've seen, they just turn the torch way down. And the reason why I don't recommend that is, in the long run, it's not good for your torch, and your bead might get cold and actually crack if you don't work very fast. But if you can't make it work my way, there's another way of doing it, and so I'm going to show you what that would look like. So you make your bead, and make sure you heat it pretty good so it won't crack, and then you turn down both your oxygen and your propane. very slow, and you want to have a bushy flame. You don't want to have an oxidizing flame, so a fairly soft, tiny flame like this. And then you can work actually the way that you would like to work. You can use your stringer, doesn't show up, you can use your stringer as a brush. Now I'm not going to move my bead, I'm going to try and write my name. I have to work fast because the bead is going to get too cold otherwise. But you see here now I can use, if I turn the torch down this much, I can use my stringer as the paintbrush, the way that your brain wants to do it. But you have to work very fast, and immediately as soon as you're done, turn your torch back up and then heat the bead thoroughly throughout. And you might want to have a tool prepared so that you can tap down parts of the stringer decoration that otherwise would tend to roll back. And I don't recommend people to do it, but a lot of students have way more luck by turning their torch down. If you do that, just make sure that you turn it up and that you heat your bead thoroughly throughout. And then you can do this, turning the torch down. Ta-da!